I'm Hannah Monroe, 34 years old, and I used to be the daughter my entire family shook their heads at with disappointment. In their eyes, I was just an ordinary housekeeper, drifting from one client's home to the next with no future and nothing to be proud of. But that morning, as I was scrubbing a marble floor inside a luxury mansion in Beverly Hills, the TV blared with breaking news that shattered their world. The new CEO acquiring the Hunt & Co. media conglomerate is Hannah Monroe. They were stunned. And me? I simply smiled and kept wringing the mop like nothing had happened. Have you ever been looked down on by your own family? Judged so harshly that they didn't even bother to ask how you were really living? If this story touches something in your heart, leave a comment, hit like, and subscribe to this channel so I can tell you the full story of how I turned their mockery into a banquet of recognition. I'm the second of three siblings, not the youngest who was spoiled, nor the eldest who carried everyone's expectations. I was the middle one, the easiest to forget. At family dinners, while Rachel bragged endlessly about a new advertising deal with a luxury perfume brand, my mother nodded enthusiastically and my father joked, "Looks like my daughter's climbing her way to the VP seat." I sat at the end of the table, quietly picking at a slice of cold meat, unnoticed. No one asked how my day was, whether I was tired, or if I had anything I wanted to share. I once had a full-ride scholarship at a local community college, dreaming of working in logistics because I had a knack for organizing and streamlining things others overlooked. But when my grandmother was diagnosed with late-stage cancer, everything came to a halt. I was the only one without a husband, without kids, without business trips or an overwhelming calendar, so I stayed behind to care for her. No one asked me to, but no one else offered to take even a single shift. She was the only person who ever told me I had the kind of eyes that noticed what others missed. "You won't stand out in a crowd," she once said, "but you're the kind of person who quietly fixes things so they can keep running." When she passed away, I closed the door to the room she had spent her final weeks in, stood in that silent apartment holding her death certificate, and didn't know what to do next. I applied for cashier jobs, but no one called. I went to receptionist interviews, but was turned down for not having a degree. Eventually, I took a job cleaning houses, found through a gig website. The first time I held a toilet brush, I thought I might break down and cry. But unexpectedly, that job brought me something I didn't anticipate: peace. While mopping a hardwood floor inside a mansion in Glendale, I listened to a podcast about startups. Folding laundry for a family of 4, I realized they used a folding method I could improve. I started taking notes. I quietly studied. But to my family, I was still Hannah the housekeeper. Every Thanksgiving, my mom would call and say, "Don't bring those clearance store snacks this year, honey. Rachel's already ordered catering from that fancy restaurant." My dad would say, "Try to make more money. At least don't let them think we have an unemployed daughter." Rachel occasionally sent me links to online courses with a message, "You should pick up a new skill, might help your situation." I didn't react, not because I was passive, but because I had grown used to them only seeing what they wanted to see. They never saw me getting up at 4 a.m. to clean my first client's house, getting home near midnight with training materials still in my hands. They never saw me spending nights calculating cash flow for a new business project in an old notebook, or researching team models for high-end service companies so I could rewrite step-by-step plans. They only saw the old car I drove, the worn shoes I wore, and the blue uniform I showed up in at my dad's birthday dinner. One time, as I walked into the house, Rachel looked me over and said, "Did you come straight from a cleaning job?" I smiled, pulled out a chair. "Yeah, didn't have time to change." My mom shook her head slightly, whispered something to my dad, then turned to me and said, "Anyway, thank you for coming. We know your job keeps you busy." I remember that evening clearly. My dad was cutting the birthday cake and looked at me over the rim of his glasses. "Hannah," he said, "don't you think it's time to switch careers? I mean, if you keep cleaning, how will you ever settle down, build something for your future?" Rachel chimed in, "Maybe you could go back and study something, logistics, or whatever it was you liked. You've got potential, you're just unfocused." I nodded slowly. They had no idea I was negotiating a 3-year contract with a luxury housing chain in Chicago. No idea I had been invited to speak at a startup summit in Austin under the alias H. Moreau. I stayed silent, not because I had nothing to say, but because I had long understood this. People who look at you through the lens of prejudice never hear you with their whole heart. They wait for confirmation of what they already believe. And sometimes, saying nothing is the clearest answer of all. They called me the maid, but I was getting ready to acquire the very company they were most proud of, and they had no idea. I still remember that morning. Foggy skies, a soft mist brushing across the window panes like the whole world was pausing to breathe. I had accepted a new cleaning assignment through an app. The address was inside a gated estate on the west side of Beverly Hills, somewhere I usually only passed by, never imagining I'd one day step inside. The house was a classic architectural beauty, with cream-colored walls, red-tiled roof, and windows that stretched from floor to ceiling. I rang the doorbell, and it was opened by an elderly woman with silver hair, tall and thin but standing upright, her eyes sharp like someone used to making high-stakes decisions. "You must be Hannah?" she asked, voice neither harsh nor warm. I nodded. "I'm Margaret Bellamy. Come in." She walked me through the house, pointing out what needed cleaning. The living room had wall-to-wall bookshelves and an old piano by the window. The study, in contrast, was chaotic. Papers, reports, financial documents, investor invitations piled like a construction site mid-renovation. I rolled up my sleeves and got to work the way I always did, starting from the smallest corner, quietly observing, memorizing, organizing without asking. As I cleared the messy desk to wipe it down, I noticed documents detailing strategic plans, market analyses, even correspondence from investment funds. It didn't take much to realize she once held a very powerful position in the business world, but what struck me most was how she stored things. Mislabeled folders, files placed under the wrong categories. I couldn't help myself. I began sorting marketing in one pile, financials in another, shareholder reports in a separate box, partnerships arranged chronologically. In just over an hour, the desk looked so organized I almost didn't recognize my own work. I was wiping dust from the bookshelf when she returned, holding a cup of tea. She paused when she saw the desk, then turned to look at me. "You did this?" I nodded cautiously, worried I might have overstepped. "I'm sorry if I changed anything you didn't want touched. I just thought organizing it might make it easier for you to find what you need." She didn't respond right away. She set her tea down, picked up one folder, opened it, and smiled. "Did you study management?" I hesitated. I had never shared personal things with clients before, but for some reason, I didn't want to deflect. I once intended to, but couldn't afford to stay in school. I've always been interested in startups, in building systems, but no one really believed I had what it takes. She let out a soft laugh, not mocking but reflective. People often doubt those with real potential, especially when they don't look the part. I didn't know what to say, so I just lowered my head and kept dusting. A moment later, she walked over and pulled a black book with silver print from the shelf. She placed it gently into my hands. "0 to 1, she said. "The author is an investor. This book won't teach you how to get rich quick, but it'll show you how to see what hasn't been built yet." I turned the cover. The old paper scent was still fresh, like it had just been printed. I'd never held a book that felt so serious. I looked up at her. "Thank you, but I'm not sure I'm smart enough to understand this." "Were you able to sort through that entire pile of chaos in under an hour?" she asked, tilting her head slightly. I nodded, still puzzled. "Then you're more than capable of understanding big ideas. Don't let small minds tell you your dream is too far away." She called me dear. It had been so long since anyone spoke to me with that kind of warmth. That one word, combined with her gaze, neither judgmental nor pitying, was like someone flipping a switch inside me. I brought the book home and read it straight through until 3 a.m. Every page lit up something in my mind, like 100 puzzle pieces finally snapping into place. I realized I didn't want to be a housekeeper forever. Not because I looked down on the work, but because I knew I could create something bigger. I started cleaning houses an hour earlier each morning to make more time for studying. I downloaded apps that taught finance, business models, how to write proposals, how to price services. While cleaning windows, I listened to marketing podcasts. While waiting on laundry cycles, I watched videos about high-end consumer behavior. And every week, Mrs. Bellamy lent me another book. Not everyone has the sensitivity to notice when a seed is beginning to sprout, but she did. She never gave me life advice or told me what I should do. She simply opened the door and let me walk through. No one in my family had any idea what was happening, but I did. A storm was quietly forming. I started planning during late nights when the streets were asleep and the city no longer buzzed with honking horns or hurried footsteps. I sat at a wooden table by the window, soft yellow light spilling over open books, notebooks filled with messy handwriting and early sketches of something I wasn't yet brave enough to name. A premium service system for wealthy, busy, meticulous people who wanted their homes to function perfectly, without ever having to think about how. I read everything I could get for free: startup podcasts, Harvard MBA lecture videos, books on consumer behavior, customer experience design, HR strategy. I took notes on every case study, every figure. I learned to analyze markets, to identify the pain points of wealthy clients, the kind who didn't need someone to clean their home, but someone who could remove all mental clutter from their living environment. During the day, I still worked my cleaning jobs, but now I paid attention differently. I watched how clients chose lighting, how they arranged their closets, their cooking habits, what times they scheduled service. There was a woman in Santa Monica who always asked me to clean her windows horizontally. And I eventually realized it was so that streaks wouldn't catch the midday sun shining directly into her living room. One homeowner in Bel Air used a smart lock system controlled by phone, but still hid a physical key under the mat, because he didn't fully trust technology. These tiny observations became the foundation of the system I would build. After nearly 2 years of working and studying, I wrote my first business plan. I named the service Blue Halo Services. The idea of a halo, invisible yet encompassing, providing peace of mind and elegance in every small detail. This wasn't just another cleaning company. It would be an integrated system of people, technology, and refined instinct, where each team member was trained not just in skills, but in service psychology. How to walk silently, how to notice without intruding, how to answer with a glance instead of words when silence was preferred. The problem was I didn't have capital. I had saved for 3 years, but it still wasn't enough to lease office space, build an internal software system, and cover early-stage payroll. I didn't want to borrow from a bank. I didn't want anyone to know. There was only one person I could ask, Mrs. Margaret Bellamy. I visited her on a late autumn afternoon. When I finished explaining the business model, her eyes held something I couldn't quite name. Maybe belief, maybe pride. She didn't say anything for 10 full minutes after I stopped speaking. Then she stood, walked into her study, and came back with a check. "This is the money I once used to invest in a venture capital fund," she said. "Now I'm investing in you. I don't expect repayment, but there's one condition." I held my breath. "What is it?" "You have to use another name. No one can know Margaret Bellamy is involved. And more importantly, you must do it right. No shortcuts, no rushing, no lowering standards to scale faster. No matter how long it takes, you protect the integrity of this idea." I nodded, overwhelmed with gratitude, stunned that someone could believe in me this deeply. I signed a lease for a tiny room in an old Pasadena building that once housed a notary's office. I painted the walls myself, installed lighting, laid carpet, and mounted a small sign that read "Blue Halo, internal only." No public signage, no real name registration. I chose the alias H. Moreau, a nod to both my initials and a literary character I once admired, someone who created an entire world according to her own logic. That first month, I had only one client, a single lawyer who wanted home care services but didn't want cleaning staff around during the day. I set up a timed entry lock, installed internal, privacy-controlled cameras, and delivered daily reports through an app I'd built myself from open source code. She referred me to a friend. That friend was married to an investment firm partner, and within 3 months, I had 5 regular clients, all entrepreneurs, attorneys, or artists. I hired my first employee, an old friend who had worked as a hotel manager, to help train our new team. We didn't call them cleaning staff, they were concierge personnel, residential coordinators. They wore uniforms like private estate butlers, trained in body language, and were instructed not to accept tips. We weren't selling service, we were offering absolute peace of mind. By the end of the first year, I expanded to San Francisco. Year 2, Seattle. Year 3, New York and Miami. The headquarters remained in Pasadena, but no one knew who I was. Every contract was signed under H. Moreau. I lived in a modest rental like anyone else, drove an old car, wore simple clothes, and showed up to family gatherings with slightly rough hands from working. No one suspected a thing. My family still asked, "You're still doing housekeeping?" I nodded, and they'd nod back. "Well, at least it's steady work." I just smiled and quietly hid the small watch I'd bought with my first real profit, not to show off, but to remind myself that quiet things can build enormous worlds. My mother's 60th birthday party was held at a small but upscale French restaurant in the city center. Everyone had arrived except for me, and I assumed the sarcastic remarks they had surely prepared in advance. I walked in wearing a pale beige dress with a simple V-neck, no jewelry, no designer purse, still holding my phone with an email open, an 8-figure deal I had just signed with a client in Dubai less than 30 minutes earlier. The scent of expensive candles mingled with their cheerful laughter, same familiar sounds I'd heard for years but never truly belonged to. I approached the table, placed my bag on the empty seat beside my mother. She glanced at me briefly, then turned her attention to Rachel's wine glass. "Ooh, you finally made it," Rachel said, her lips curving slightly. "Were you scrubbing somewhere that made you late?" Her voice was light, but every word a blade, sharpened by confidence and pride. I gave a faint smile and sat down. "The client was a bit demanding," I replied, pouring a bit of red wine into the glass in front of me. "They required everything to meet international standards." Rachel raised her eyebrows. "Wow, international standards? Must be a sparkling clean Dubai toilet then." My mother gave a weak laugh, as if pretending the jab wasn't worth addressing. My father buried his face in the menu, uninterested. The cousins on the other side of the table were deep in discussion about stocks and mortgage rates. I sipped my wine quietly, listening without reacting. "I heard," Rachel continued, now angling her chair slightly toward me as if inviting the whole table to tune in. "Hunt & Co. is about to be acquired. That's my company. This morning they were valued at over $50 million. If everything goes well, I'll be on the executive team of the new firm by next month." I nodded, eyes still on my wine. "Sounds exciting." She laughed loudly, tossing her head back. "Right? See, sometimes sticking with something really pays off." Mom chimed in, beaming with pride. "Rachel's had a business mind since she was a kid, always knew how to seize an opportunity. And you? Well, we're just glad you're doing okay, even if you didn't get quite as lucky as your sister." I set my glass down gently and offered a quiet smile. My mother hadn't changed, always speaking as if offering comfort, yet embedding a subtle blade within each sentence. As the appetizers were served, Rachel went on about a recent meeting. The acquiring company's board had requested a face-to-face with the marketing team. "Their CEO is supposed to be really difficult," she said. "Name's Logan Hunt. Young, cold, and absolutely hates indecisive women. I'll have to prep carefully to defend my team." My heart paused for a beat. I knew that name. Logan Hunt. The man who once called me a burden. The man who walked out of my life without a text, without a word, the moment he learned I had dropped out of college to care for my grandmother. The man who told our mutual friend, "Hannah doesn't have what it takes to do anything big. She might make a sweet girlfriend, but she's going nowhere." And now he was in talks to sell his company to me. I watched Rachel as she kept talking. In my mind, the merger contract's clauses replayed with perfect clarity, like they were printed across the tablecloth. Clause number 14, buyer reserves the right to meet with existing leadership before rebranding is finalized, which meant I would see Rachel again, not as the underestimated little sister, but as the buyer. So who's acquiring the company? I asked lightly, feigning casual curiosity. Rachel glanced at me, slightly surprised I'd ask something business. Blue something, I forget. Probably some kind of tech-inbore logistics group. Their CEO has a weird name. H. Moreau or something? I smirked. Interesting name. Rachel shrugged. Probably some outsourced labor company trying to rebrand and make their model look legit. Nothing worth worrying about. I didn't reply. I glanced around the table. My mother scooping vegetables onto her plate, my father placing an order for grilled ribs, and Rachel still assuming she was about to enter a golden chapter in her career. No one here knew that the name H. Moreau belonged to the person about to change their entire trajectory. I gently swirled my wine glass, the chandelier light catching the crimson hue in my eyes. You're right about one thing, I said softly. When you keep pursuing what you believe in, it eventually pays off. Rachel didn't notice or didn't understand. She just chuckled and moved on to her plans for a Europe trip after the deal. I sat there in silence, letting every word they spoke etch itself into my memory, quiet fuel for what I was about to do. And deep down, I knew I wouldn't need to say another word. The truth that was coming would speak for itself. 3 weeks after my mother's birthday dinner, my name appeared across financial headlines. Not my real name, of course, but the name I had used for every major transaction over the past 3 years. H. Morel. Mysterious startup Blue Halo Services acquires Hunt & Co. after prolonged losses. The media and the market were stunned. Hunt & Co. had once been a giant in the digital media space, valued at over $100 million, a staple in every industry conference for a decade. But after 3 years of stagnation and failure to innovate, they had found their way to my negotiation table. I didn't scroll through social media like everyone else. I held the printed bulletin in my hand, delivered by my executive assistant in my Manhattan office. The cover showed Hunt & Co.'s headquarters, with a bold headline underneath, waiting for the next move from mystery CEO. I set the paper down, gazing out the window as the late autumn sun gilded the streets below. The contract had been signed 2 days ago, and today I would walk into their headquarters to make it official. I hadn't said a word to my family, not because I wanted to shock them, but because I wanted them to see it for themselves. I wanted the truth to land at exactly the right time, no sooner, no later, like a symphony building to its final crescendo. The lobby of Hunt & Co. was taut with tension. Employees whispered, department heads paced. My name, or rather the name they knew, was highlighted in red on today's appointment calendar. CEO of Blue Halo, arriving to sign and announce acquisition. I stepped in, wearing an ivory suit, no jewelry, no entourage. I wanted every gaze to meet my eyes, not my image. The receptionist recognized me from the internal photo that had been circulated beforehand. She stood up nervously, bowing slightly. Good morning. Ms. Moreau? Mr. Hunt is waiting for you in the 10th floor conference room. The glass doors opened into a large boardroom where Logan Hunt stood before a screen detailing the transition plan. He turned around. For a brief second, time froze. His face went pale. His eyes widened like he had just seen a ghost. Tiana. I nodded and walked toward him, composed as if the years had never left a scar. You once said I wasn't good enough, I said quietly, just loud enough for only him to hear. I just wanted to prove I am. Logan stepped back half a pace, then steadied himself. I didn't expect that you'd be the one. The one capable of buying the company you once bragged about? I finished the sentence for him. He nodded slowly, still visibly shaken. You've changed so much. And you haven't, I replied. You still judge people by the surface, still think a girl who scrubs floors can't run something complex. Logan gave a weak smile, avoiding my gaze. I was wrong. I didn't respond. I wasn't here for confessions. I wasn't here to gloat. I was here to do business, and the most important part hadn't started yet. Rachel walked in 5 minutes later, holding a notepad, face fully made up like it was any other executive meeting. She glanced around the room, not recognizing me at first. Good morning. I'm Rachel Monroe, head of communications at Hunt & Co. I'll be speaking on behalf of the team today. I looked up from the documents in front of me. Good morning. She stopped mid-step. Her eyes widened. Her hand froze on the back of the chair. She didn't need a second look. Anna? Yes. Nope, no way. I'm the current CEO of Blue Halo Services, I said clearly, and the one who just acquired your company. Rachel's face drained of color. Her hands trembled, nearly dropping the pen. She looked at Logan, then back at me, her voice unsteady. Why didn't you say anything? I didn't think you needed to know, I replied, still calm, no longer the hesitant Hannah she remembered. You once said I had no direction. I just didn't see the point in telling you you were wrong until now. The room fell silent. Logan's legal counsel cleared his throat, suggesting we begin the session. I nodded, took the chair at the head of the table, opened my laptop, and started signing the papers, every click of the pen echoing in near silence. Rachel didn't say another word, neither did Logan, but I could feel the weight inside both of them, the kind of upheaval no apology could settle. I had walked through all those years they looked down on me, not with rage, not with grand declarations, but step by step, quietly, with certainty. Now I didn't need to shout, I only needed to show up. My presence alone was the answer. That evening, my entire family sat around a long table covered in white silk, under warm golden lights. The glass walls lining one side of the room revealed a glowing city skyline below. This restaurant once had a 6-month wait list, but I now owned it. And tonight, I had closed it entirely for just 4 guests. My mother sat at the head of the table on the right, dressed in a purple silk shawl, her eyes still carrying the awkwardness she'd worn since stepping into the room. My father sat across from her, glancing around now and then as if trying to convince himself this wasn't a dream. Rachel had been silent ever since the restaurant's staff greeted her by name. Miss Monroe, as listed on the owner's priority guest list. She sat beside me, but the space between us felt as vast as all the years I'd been overlooked. In front of each person was an ivory envelope, their name printed in black ink, handwritten by me. I said nothing until the server finished pouring the first glass of wine and stepped back quietly like a shadow. Tonight, I began, my voice calm but clear, there will be no speech, no presentation, only the truth, and each of you will hold it in your own hands. I gave a slight nod. They exchanged glances before opening their envelopes, one by one. My mother went first. She pulled out a stack of neatly folded papers. On them was a list of times I had called, emailed, or handwritten letters asking her and my father for help in the early years of my business. There were loan cosign requests for a small bank loan, an invitation to a local art show when I was trying to sell paintings to make extra income, and a fragmented voicemail asking if I could stay in the house for 3 weeks after losing my apartment. Each entry was marked declined, some with notes like not convenient, probably not a good idea, or just plain can't. At the bottom of the list was a photo of the first office space I had rented with side job savings. Tucked away in an old industrial area, no sign, no carpet, just a wooden desk and a standing fan. My mother set the paper down, her hands slightly trembling. She said nothing. I looked at her, not with blame. I just wanted her to look again. Not to see fault, but to see the distance between herself and the daughter she once said needed more time to find direction. Rachel opened the second envelope. Inside was a printed email, sent from her personal inbox 6 years ago. It was a rejection of my business pitch, dismissing it as an unscalable model in premium labor services and suggesting that Hannah should focus on a stable career instead of dreaming. I still remember reading that email in a cheap rental room, my hand clenched so tight the nails left marks in my palm. Beneath the email was a single line. Had you invested $5,000 back then, today you'd own $9.8 million in unsold equity. Rachel's face went pale. She looked at me, mouth opening to speak, but no words came. I didn't look at her with anger. My eyes brushed past hers like a breeze gliding over memories too heavy to revisit. The last envelope was my father's. Inside was only one page, the cover of a Forbes magazine, my image in a white suit standing in front of the Blue Halo headquarters, headline bold across the top. The woman who built an empire from a mop. He stared at the image for a long time. His fingers touched the edge of the page, too gently to crease it, too unsure to hold it steady. Then he looked up, his eyes no longer carrying the same rigid authority. That was you? All along? I nodded. Since the day you told me I couldn't see beyond a broom. He exhaled, so long it sounded like he was releasing years of believing he was right. No one said anything for several minutes. No applause, no congratulations, just glances. Some understanding, some stepping back to see more clearly. Finally, my mother spoke, her voice soft as wind. Why didn't you tell us sooner? I placed my hand gently on the wine glass. Because I couldn't bear to ask you to believe in me again. I needed to build something you couldn't deny, even if you still doubted me. No one objected. They just sat there in silence, each alone with their own version of me, the silent, thin, house-cleaning girl, now sitting across from them, calm and clear, with no room left for excuses. My mother cried, truly cried, not like the teary sniffle she had during sad movies, but with the kind of soundless sobs that made her reach for a napkin to cover her face. She said nothing more. Eyes red, looking at me like I was a stranger who had walked into her life, someone she had never truly known. Rachel sat upright, but her jaw was tight, her lips pressed so hard they had turned white. She still hadn't said a word. I knew for her, the shock hadn't worn off, and the sting to her pride was only growing. But I hadn't come here to shame anyone. I just wanted the light to shine on the dust-covered parts of my life. I looked at the three of them slowly. No blame, no resentment. I didn't stay silent to prove anything. I don't need praise or validation to feel worthy. But at some point I realized I couldn't keep living like a shadow in my own family. My father sat across from me, hands resting on the table, not clasped together like he usually did when preparing to argue. They just sat there, still. After a moment, he said quietly, "I'm sorry, I truly thought you'd never do anything big." I tilted my head slightly and met his gaze. "It wasn't because you thought I was incapable, was it?" He swallowed hard. I thought you were too soft, not like Rachel, not assertive. You didn't ask for things. I assumed you were better suited for something small, steady, safe." I gave a faint smile, though there was no joy in it. That assumption was what held me back for so many years. I'm not upset you didn't give me money or guidance or invest. I only regret that you never once asked what I truly wanted. The room stayed silent. The soft strains of a string quartet echoed faintly from across the room. I let my fingertips glide across the surface of the table, almost as if trying to feel the heartbeat of the moment. Growing up, every time I did something that went against expectations, the family would brush it off with, "That's not for you." But no one ever asked why I chose it. When I dropped out of school to care for Grandma, Mom said I was throwing away my future. When I turned down the receptionist job at Uncle Ron's, who I knew had fired 3 women just for being too old, the family said I was arrogant. I wasn't arrogant, I just had boundaries. And those boundaries led me right here. My mother looked up. "I didn't know you thought about all that," her voice trembled. "I just thought you were lost, unsure where to go." I nodded gently. And because you believed that, you never saw that I was carving my own path. You were too focused on the dead-end road to notice I was climbing the wall. A moment passed, and Rachel finally spoke, voice hoarse. So, all these years, you quietly made money, built a company, expanded everywhere, but never said a word. Did you ever think about how that felt for the family? For Mom? For Dad? For me? I turned to look at her. Do you want the honest answer? Rachel clenched her hands on her lap. Of course I thought about it, I said. I thought about every time I asked Mom for a ride to school in the rain, and she said no, because she had to drop you off at a friend's party. I thought about my 15th birthday when Dad said we couldn't afford a party for me because Rachel needed a new laptop. I thought about all those family gatherings where everyone asked you how many clients you'd landed, while I got teased for not even covering my rent. Rachel lowered her head. My voice wasn't bitter, I spoke like a narrator, because the truth didn't need embellishment. It carried its own weight. But no, I continued, I didn't keep it a secret out of anger. I stayed quiet because if I had told you, no one in this family would have believed me. And I was too tired of asking anyone to believe I had value. Once again, silence filled the room. I stood slowly, my eyes sweeping the elegant space I had once redesigned myself. I didn't come here to revisit the past. I don't need apologies. I don't need to prove I was right. I just need Mom, Dad, and you, Rachel, to see me for who I really am. Not the cleaning girl, not the less successful sibling, but a grown woman with principles, with purpose, and with the right to choose her own path. I returned to my seat, sat down gently, and looked at the three people in front of me. That's all I needed. A week after the dinner at the restaurant, I received a text from Rachel early in the morning as I was making coffee in the sunlit kitchen of my apartment on West End Avenue. The message was short, without frills, none of the emotional hooks she normally used in emails to major clients. Just one line. Can you help me relearn management? I read that message 3 times. Not because I was surprised, but because I realized this was the first time Rachel had spoken with true humility. No superiority, no disguised advice or suggestions. This time she asked and waited. I set the coffee mug down, leaned against the counter, and looked through the window where sunlight filtered through leaves turning golden. My phone buzzed again. Another message appeared. It's not about money, I think I need to understand how you did it, because even now I can't picture it. I took a deep breath and typed back, okay, but you'll start as a trainee, like I did. The typing dots appeared and disappeared. No immediate reply. I knew Rachel was wrestling with her pride, but a few minutes later another message came. When can I start? I smiled. Not because I wanted payback, but because we were speaking as two adults, no family roles in between. The following week, I arranged for Rachel to join the new staff onboarding program at our Brooklyn branch. No one there knew she was my sister. Her name badge read in full, Rachel Monroe, Junior Administrative Trainee. On her first day, I had her sit through an operations analytics review, learn how to write meeting minutes, and observe the client intake process I had built over 3 years. That afternoon, she texted me a photo of the shift assignment board, along with the message. Now I get why you're so good at management. It's not because you're smart, it's because you've built a discipline no one else could teach. I didn't respond, I just saved the photo, like a rare, beautiful memory between us. Around that same time, I got a phone call from my mother. Her voice sounded softer than usual, no blame, no barrage of questions. She simply said, "Are you free Saturday? I'm planning to cook dinner at home." No occasion. I just wanted to invite you to eat with me. I paused for a moment, then asked, "Anyone else coming?" "I only invited you," she hesitated. "If you prefer, your dad will stay downstairs. No one will bother us." I nodded, even though she couldn't see it. "I'll come." That dinner happened in the old kitchen I grew up in, the one with the pen marks I scribbled on the wall when I was 8. Mom made my favorite stew, placed a candle on the table even though it wasn't necessary, and throughout the meal, she didn't ask about the company or money or recognition. She talked about a plant she was caring for in the yard. the new neighbor who had just moved in, and an article she'd read about how successful women often hide their scars. "Do you think that's true?" she asked, looking at me through the candlelight. I tore a piece of bread, chewed slowly, then replied, "It's not about hiding. It's just that when you've been underestimated for so long, sometimes even you can't tell where your wounds end and your strength begins." She said nothing. A moment later, she reached out and took my hand. Her hand wasn't as firm as it used to be, but it felt warm. Not the warmth of someone trying to make amends, but of a mother learning how to hold her child's hand again. From the beginning, with Dad, it was different. He didn't say anything for a month. But one day, I received a handwritten letter, a few short lines, his handwriting still sharp and square, like back when he was a chief accountant. "I read your TED Talk. I didn't know you saw the world with such depth. I'm sorry I never asked. But if you're willing, I'd like to take a walk with you at Central Park this Sunday. I'll bring coffee. If you don't reply, I'll understand." I read the letter under my desk lamp in the study. Then I looked up at the old photo hanging behind my desk. Me, mopping a floor in a blue uniform. I'd never taken it down, not out of nostalgia, but because I'd never been ashamed of where I started. This time, I would meet my father, but not as the daughter he used to dismiss. I'd meet him as a grown woman, someone who knew how to draw boundaries, how to share when ready, and who didn't need approval to feel whole. I'm Hannah Monroe, no longer the blurry name at family dinners, nor the whispered story of the one with the hands-on job. I am who I am. And if someone truly wants to understand, I'll tell them, but not because they ask, because I choose to believe they're ready to listen. That morning, I drove out to the suburb where my grandmother once lived. The old road was lined with trees, quiet, as if the past still breathed in the stillness. The cemetery sat on a gentle hill, rows of stone markers evenly spaced, the grass trimmed, fresh flowers scattered across the graves. I parked, stepped out, holding a bouquet of white tulips and a worn book with a faded cover and yellowed pages. 0 to 1, the book Mrs. Bellamy had once given me. I walked past the rows, reaching the familiar spot beneath a tall maple tree. My grandmother was buried there, beneath a gray stone marker, engraved with her full name and a small line I had asked the mason to add. The first to believe in Hannah. I knelt down, brushed off the light dust from the stone, placed the tulips in the vase beside it, then reached into my bag, pulled out the book, and gently placed it on the cool surface. "Grandma," I whispered, "I didn't let you down." A gentle breeze brushed against my shoulder, rustling the leaves above. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting memories flow like a stream. Those evenings when she sat brushing my hair, her words when I was sad, the stern yet gentle look whenever I feared something beyond my strength. Without her, I might never have learned to endure silently without losing myself. I stood up, pulled a small photo from my wallet, me and her in the old kitchen. In the picture, I was smiling brightly, while she looked at me with a warmth I've never seen in anyone else. I placed the photo on the stone ledge, held it down with a small rock, then stepped back and took a deep breath. The wind carried the scent of freshly cut grass mixed with soft sunlight, a fragrance that made me feel small yet strangely powerful. That evening, I returned to the city, changed into a simple dark blue dress, tied my hair neatly, and went to the building where I had planned a small gathering weeks ago. It wasn't a business gala, no media, no reporters, just an intimate meeting for those who once believed in me, even if only once in their lives. The top-floor room overlooked the city skyline, bathed in soft light over linen-cushioned wooden chairs, white cloth tables with baby's breath flowers interspersed with lavender. On the wall hung a large screen covered by a cloth hiding the new logo. Mrs. Bellamy arrived early, still graceful in her light gray suit. She came over, shook my hand, holding it longer than usual. "You did it," she whispered, "and in a way people will study for years to come." I squeezed her hand gently, eyes stinging. Jason, my first employee who left his hotel receptionist job to join me in the early days before we had an official office, was there too. He brought his wife and newborn daughter, the baby, wearing a dress printed with Little Dreamer. He smiled at me, saying, "Hannah." Today I told her that her mom used to work for someone everyone thought was crazy for imagining AI-integrated cleaning services. I smiled and stood quietly, listening to everyone share little sparkling stories, like precious stones gathered to pave the path I'd walked. An old classmate who had quietly sent me $100 when he saw my post seeking investors in that first year was there. "I never thought that $100 would become something big," he said, "but when I got your thank you note back then, I knew I was witnessing something beginning." After everyone settled, I walked to the small podium at the front, gently pulled the cloth off the screen. The logo appeared. Blue Halo Foundation, supporting hidden dreamers. Applause followed. Not loud, but slow and heartfelt. I looked up at them. I used to be invisible. I walked into rooms no one remembered, sat at the corner of the table, no one asked for input. But it was there I learned to listen to what wasn't spoken, to see what no one noticed. Blue Halo was born from that. A desire to make sure no one lives a life whose value is hidden simply because they don't fit someone else's view. I glanced down at the logo again, my hand resting lightly on the words, Hidden Dreamers. This foundation will fund scholarships, hands-on courses, and opportunities for those overlooked, without degrees, without wealth, but with will. People like me once was. The room was silent for a moment, then a longer round of applause filled the space, louder and clearer this time. I returned to my seat, poured a glass of wine, and looked around at faces smiling, nodding, tearing up, each one a vital piece of a journey I never wanted to relive, yet will always be grateful for having walked. I am no longer the invisible housekeeper, no longer the shadow at family dinners, nor the cleaning girl some once sneered at. I am the one who rewrote my entire story with my own hands from the blank first pages. And now I write not only for myself, but for all who were once deemed not enough. Because sometimes the greatest dream isn't standing at the top. It's returning to where you were left behind, carrying light and opening the door for others to step through. What do you think about my story? About the journey from a quiet cleaning girl to sitting with those who once looked down on me without bowing my head? Have you ever felt underestimated, assigned a role you never chose? If so, I hope my story is a gentle reminder that silence doesn't mean weakness. And sometimes, the strongest response is living true to yourself, letting success speak for itself. I don't share this journey seeking pity or praise. I share it because somewhere out there, someone might be quietly working, hiding a dream in a cramped corner, waiting for a sign that they are not alone. If you are that someone, I hope you keep going. You don't need anyone's belief, just don't give up on yourself. And if you want to explore more true stories with me, from life, from family, from the hidden corners we sometimes quietly pass through, please follow the channel. I will share more, not to boast of success, but to help us better understand the path that leads there. See you in the next story.